Welcome everyone. Today we are going to be speaking with local photographer Danny Graber. Danny's recent work, Seasons of Amish Life, has been published by Herald Press and gives us a glimpse into the rhythms of the year around the spectrum of Amish communities here at Fables. So thank you for joining us, Danny. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, at this point, I'm retired, so I have plenty of time to take more pictures. But in my youth, I spent all of my life, as a matter, on the farm, and I considered it all very hard work and sometimes somewhat unpleasant. But I think it also built a lot of character, I hope. So the first 20 years I spent working on the farm, and to make life more interesting, a good number of those years were spent growing up in an Amish. You will find in the photographs in the book that I had published. And then as I became older, and at age of 21, as all young boys must do, or I should say, or as young boys must do, we were drafted. And of course, having a Mennonite and Amish background, that included doing the conscientious objector service, or what is referred to as 1W service. And that took me off to New York City, which is where I lived for 4 years, and got an education there just by virtue of the culture. And during that time, I also moved then to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and proceeded to get a college degree. And from there, I worked in public government offices, and also I worked for Mennonite Mutual Aid. And all of those years, I was spent my life as a technical writer and research and compliance analyst, both for public housing and then also for health insurance. So sort of the background of just going through life, I guess, like everybody else does.
Sure. So what inspired you to start photoing Amish and leading up to this book?
Well, this is an interesting question because as a photographer, everybody goes around photographing waterfalls and squirrels and ducks and sunsets and sunrises and stuff. And I always felt that I should be a little bit more unique and photograph something different. And I have to apologize here. What I'm saying is that for over a period of a year, I kept visiting this issue. What should I do and what should I photograph, and how can I best use my talents as a photographer and at the same time tell a story that is unique? And so one day, driving through LaGrange County, my home county, when I was a youngster, and just became intrigued again by the fact that there's a culture that lives in LaGrange County that is completely different from the rest of the world, or most of the society in the United States. And I thought, well, maybe that would be a good topic for me to try to capture the essence of that community.
Wonderful. Do you have a favorite part of your book?
Oh, the ice harvesting, or the gathering of ice in one of the last chapters, one of the last series of photos, was the most amazing to me. And yeah, thank you for showing that. That's an intriguing photograph, I think. You know, everybody did what you saw in that picture back in the 1800s. Nobody does that today. My grandparents and your great-grandparents and everybody's great-grandparents, when they were growing up, had an ice box in their house. An ice box is since long gone, with the exception of some Amish communities still use the ice box. So the question is, how do you get ice to put in your ice box to refrigerate your food? And in northern Indiana here, I know at least 2 Amish small communities that every winter they harvest ice off of a frozen over lake. So every December or January or February, whenever the weather gets cold enough, um, they they being the one winter I spent with them when they were harvesting ice, had 11 families there that day, all chopping and loading ice and hauling it home on their farm wagons to their ice storage houses.
So what is an ice storage house?
Well, if you live in Goshen and if you live in this area and if you ride on the Pumpkin Vine Nature Trail, and I can't tell you the crossroad, but at one point you ride your bicycle right past an ice storage house. It's an it is a white painted little shed that's so nondescript you wonder what in the world it's doing out there, but it's a little shed that has like 15 to 20 inch thick walls that are heavily insulated, and it has one door in the front, and if you open that door you will see that it has tons of ice blocks inside, and they store that ice in the ice storage shed year round. It lasts the whole summer. The one farmer had enough in his storage shed to last for 2 full years, meaning his ice stayed frozen in that storage house for a period of 2 years. But whenever their refrigerator, as I will call it, or I should say ice box, runs out of ice, they come and grab another block, and they take a block of ice and put it in the top part of their refrigerator. And as you know, cool air, cold, moves downward, and so the food is stored underneath the ice block. And if you open the front door, the refrigerator door, it looks similar to a refrigerator that you would think of back in the 50s or 60s or something. And so their food is in there, and that's how they preserve, or that's how they store food during the summer and winter.
All right. Was there anything that you ended up editing out of this book? And how was that process for you?
Yes, that's a good question. I made, or one of the agreements I made with the Amish when I was photographing their activities. And of course, most people know that Amish people do not like to be photographed. And so with everybody that's in this book, for the most part, I'd say 90% of the people I had conversations with, in which I explained to them what I was doing, and I explained to them that I would not focus on them per se, and I would not do portraits, but I'm merely trying to capture the story of what their work life is and their community life. And they were quite fine with that. I would say not all communities are going to be fine with that, but the community I worked in was okay with it. Then I made the promise and commitment that once I'm finished photographing and I'm ready to make some kind of publication of this, that I would let them review all of the photographs, and they could remove anything that they found either offensive or not acceptable. So there were some photos that were removed at their request, and I honored my commitment to that. And then of course the big thing that I wanted to do was I would have liked to photograph more social events, but I really did not do any work inside houses. If you notice, most of my work is outdoors and sort of at a distance. Nonetheless, I was in the fields with them and I was in the gardens with them. So there just wasn't much photography inside anybody's house where a social or a family gathering was going on. So that's the part that I would like to do, but that requires more intimacy with a camera.
Certainly. What led you to photography itself? Not just like the photography in this book, but why did you pick up the camera the first time?
I don't know how easily I can explain that process. I just became interested in cameras back when I was 30 years old, and I started experimenting and exploring. And I will tell you that at that point, I had no idea whether I was even an artist or not. I started hanging out with professional photographers, and I used to work with them, and I would carry their equipment around for them, just for the honor of being around other photographers. I never got paid, but I just carried their equipment and I developed film for them, etc. And in the process, I learned the process of how you do photography. I would say the other thing is it's a storytelling. Photography is a storytelling medium, just as writing is. And so my goal is, when I'm doing photography, is to take a picture that tells a story. My book I would consider photojournalism, or an essay, or a narrative. If you take only one picture in your life, it should tell a good story. Sometimes you need to put together a series of photographs to tell a good story, and I consider this book to be a series of photographs that describes and conveys a theme about how the Amish live.
Wonderful. While you were creating this book, did you find the process to be energizing or exhausting?
Oh, it was energizing and fun. I mean, obviously I would get frustrated at some point in time, but it was, when you do something that you love, it energizes you. And when you do something that you like this much, it just becomes fun. The people in the community that I photographed just loved to have conversations. And if you were to know me real well, that's not anything that I avoid either. So we talked a lot about farming. Sometimes we talked a little bit about politics, sometimes a little bit about religion, which I'm not so good at sometimes. But
was there anyone that you relied on while you were both taking these photos, but then also after it, where it says you're putting together the book itself? Support people?
I had like three main people who I communicated with, who were sort of the center of the communities, and I often had lengthy conversations with these people. One of the Amish leaders that I had conversations with happened to be a former classmate of mine. He and I went to school together, and he is currently, has been for a long time, an Amish minister. And when I explained to him what I was doing or what I would like to do, he said, in regards to the Amish, he said, it's a story worthy of being told. And that, in my mind, gave me permission to pursue my goal, but also at the same time respect what they do and how they want it done. That minister was the previous owner of the barn that is in the barn raising series in the book. The initial barn had burned down due to a fire, and his daughter and son-in-law currently live on the farm, but they were the ones rebuilding the farm. And when they were rebuilding that farm, that was just a big open door for me to have more conversation with him. And to me, the second most favorite part of the book is the barn raising. It's just amazing to watch 100 men get together and all work nonstop, and nobody instructing them what to do, because they all knew how to do it from the beginning.
There's the picture.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite photographs in the book. Thank you.
Glad I opened to it. Are you working on anything new? Have any other plans?
I would love to be working on something new. I am sort of tossing ideas around in my mind, and the question is, do I go back to the Amish community and ask for another project? In some ways I would like to. my distance from where I live in Elkhart to where the Amish community is that I was photographing is like 30 miles one way. So sometimes I would drive over there twice in one day to get the picture I wanted. So that's like, if you put that together, it comes out to be 120 miles on my car, which is fine, but it takes a lot of energy. And if I do another project, it would be a little bit more oriented toward that social structure that they have in the family gatherings, and there are young folks who play volleyball and softball and have ice cream socials, etc. It would just require a little bit more effort and energy than I did the first time, I think. So, but it's not out of the question. And the other, if I have another project in mind, I would really like to capture the life and how it is impacted by the COVID-19 coronavirus that we're currently experiencing. It's affecting a lot of people in a lot of negative ways. And I wish I would have a method of capturing that. And of course, if I sit on my rear end and don't get out and do anything, that's just the way it's going to be. So your question is well taken, and I hope it makes me move forward.
Well, there you go. I hope you get some inspiration. My final question for you is, if there was one thing people could take away after reading and viewing your photos here, what do you hope people learn from your book?
I guess the word community, the essence of helping each other, the essence of especially in the current virus situation that we have, the pandemic, is just important that everybody has to lend a helping hand. And it's just, we live such separate lives these days, and it just seems that we could be so much better dispositioned, and we would all have so much better countenance if we were more of a community. And so I want people to take this away. I want people to take that from the book and say, I can be a better person if I am a better part of the community.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we wish you luck in whatever new projects you decide to pursue.
You are so welcome, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having an interest in my book. I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, it's lovely.